Among casual viewers of Hunter x Hunter, there is probably no arc more controversial than the Chimera Ant arc. Taking up nearly a third of the entire animated series, the Chimera Ant arc is a massive departure from everything that came before. It's 3 times as long as the arc in second place, is much darker than even York New City, introduces characters who are eons stronger than anyone prior, and thrusts our main characters to the sideline in this larger conflict. For these reasons alone, it's easy to see why some people may not enjoy this arc on a first watch. But a defense of this arc's merit will simply have to wait for another day on this channel. What concerns me today is not the Chimera Ant arc itself, but the implications of this arc on the rest of the series. Seeing as how there aren't many TV series, let alone anime, that can boast a length as long as Hunter x Hunter, I think the fallout of this arc presents a unique opportunity for Togashi as a storyteller. You see, in the Chimera Ant arc, Togashi writes out 3 of his 5 main characters, that being Leorio, Krapika, and Hisoka. You may think removing characters from the story can hurt the writing around them, but actually, Togashi takes advantage of this. By placing such a massive epic in the middle of a story like this one, Togashi is given room to take Hunter x Hunter in a completely unique direction by developing the plot and characters off-screen. Spoilers for the Dark Continent expedition and, the event right before the Succession War begins. In a show full of striking and iconic scenes, one which has continually stood out in my mind is the reintroduction of Krapika into the story. Although he may be donning a suit and has clearly moved up in the ranks of the Nostrad family, overall, Krapika doesn't seem too different at first. He's a little more serious, but his appearance and demeanor seem largely unchanged. That is until Mr. Milkman mentions his clan's eyes, which then causes Krapika to activate Emperor Time and threaten to kill him in the lobby. Part of what makes this scene so iconic is just what a shocking disparity exists between this scene and when we last saw Krapika. As stated earlier, Krapika has not been in the series for about 80 episodes. In the last major arc which focused on him, we saw he was hesitant to strike down one of the men responsible for slaughtering his own clan. Now all this time later, someone merely mentions his brethren's eyes, and suddenly, he's as resolute as ever. The rest of this arc would reveal just how lonely and alienated this character has grown. We see him sit in front of the Scarlet Eyes, reflecting on how he no longer has anywhere to call home or anyone who he truly feels close to. It's very, very sad. And we, the audience, feel sad we couldn't be with him either. Krapika was not just separated from the characters in the story, but the audience as well, adding a metatextual context to his descent. But I know some of you are definitely thinking it. Why not just do this? Doesn't a time skip accomplish the same thing? Well, yes. And no. Technically, yes. Time skips in a story can allow characters to change off-screen so that when we return to them, they can be completely different. But is it the same thing as actually making the audience wade through that time themselves? I argue, no. It's not just about what is done, it's about how it's done. There's an old video I have on this channel where I thoroughly analyze and discuss some famous oneers from the last decade or so. Technically, all of the scenes I showed as oneers could have been done as multiple different shots from different angles. In fact, it would have been much easier to shoot it that way. But would it have the same effect? Would we, the audience, feel the same level of tension as Elliot dodges security in his building if we were constantly jumping around the room and skipping time? Would we identify as strongly with him and anxiously await what lies just off screen? No. It's one thing to jump forward in time, it's another to make your audience actually wait through that time in a different place and then return. I would say show don't tell, but since we're explicitly talking about not showing, that feels a little improper. I realize this is very nebulous and hard to explain, so instead of just grasping at straws to address why I think this was done well, I'm going to juxtapose this with an extreme example of executing this idea wrong, as I think it would make this way easier to understand. Let's dissect part of the internet's favorite anime. I promise I don't actually hate this show as much as everyone else, but as someone who has seen the entire original 175 episode series run, bear with me on this one. At the end of the Tenro Island arc in Fairy Tail, one of the dramatic focal points of the entire series, our main cast and a lot of prominent members of the Fairy Tale Guild are attacked by the dragon Acnologia. Despite the best efforts of everyone on the island, no one is able to put a dent into it. Seeing no means of victory, the members of the guild hold hands and the audience watches as the island gets eviscerated. So naturally, after this, we follow other members of the guild who weren't on Tenro Island, aka all the weak ones, and 7 years goes by without anyone knowing what happened. Naturally, since all the powerhouses are gone, other guilds have ascended to the top above Fairy Tale. But there is a glimmer of hope. With cooperation from another friendly guild, they learn Tenro Island still exists, and a team embarks on an expedition to go get them. While that team is out trying to find them, a rival, bully guild Twilight Ogre, has come to retrieve money from Fairy Tale. But, at the last second, before they can do anything to our team, the heroes of the past arrive in the present, 7 years later, to triumphantly save the day. So how long did this 7-year time gap take? How long were our beloved characters written out of the story? 1 episode. In 1 episode, the entire problem is resolved. Even when I was a bigger fan of the show, this moment has always sat wrong with me. I'm not saying that it wasn't obvious the main characters would return somehow. I mean, come on, are we really gonna kill every important member of the guild off in one fell swoop? But, you know, maybe you should generate like an ounce of doubt in your audience. We barely have time to process or understand the implications of everyone's disappearance. We barely have time to see how this has emotionally affected anyone. And just like that, ta-da, it's like nothing ever happened. This all happens way too fast. Sure, the show has told me 7 years have passed, but do I feel it? Has it been 7 years for me, or at the very least any significant amount of time? No, it hasn't. It's been 20 minutes of the show's runtime since we last saw these characters. I had no time to develop remorse, and I had no time to identify with those left behind who missed our protagonists. When they come back, it's not like I miss them, I just saw them. And that really leads to the surprising thesis of this whole discussion.
Emotions take time.
There are some things you can't cheat in storytelling. And even with things you can, there are rewards for skipping the shortcuts. The way you tell your story can be just as important, if not more, than the story itself. Togashi could have made the Chimera Ant arc shorter and just written a time skip into the plot following the election. But he didn't. And because of that, the effect of Krapika coming back is even stronger. We've had time to wonder where he is, what he's been up to, time in real life, time while watching other arcs of the story. We aren't just told there were gaps, we ourselves experienced a gap. So when we see he's changed, we believe it. Part of what makes this so much better is that the gap is never really called attention to. Rather than remind the audience how much time has passed, Togashi just lets the character casually stroll back into the story. This makes his behavior all the more shocking and causes the audience to have an organic realization of just how long it's been. And that right there might be enough for one video, but believe it or not, this is not the only trick the length of the Chimera Ant arc grants Togashi as a storyteller. I did start this video by saying that 3 main characters were written out of the plot for that arc, and although we've only covered one person thus far, there's still more to say about the others. You see, with the difference in chapters this large, Togashi gets to do something I'm not sure I've ever seen a story do. He gets to adequately build something up, move on for about 100 episodes, and then bring it back seemingly out of nowhere to treat his audience. Yes, I am of course talking about... It may have been years in the making, but boy did it ever deliver on its indescribable hype. I know some people find the stalemate ending to York New City a little anticlimactic. Well, I can understand that point of view. I mean, come on, this is way better than anything we would have gotten there. I've watched quite a bit of anime, quite a bit of shonen, and I have to say, I don't think I've ever seen a story build up a fight, not do it, continue to build up the possibility of that fight after the fact, abandon the plot thread completely for 100 episodes, and then suddenly just bring it on the audience in the middle of a completely different storyline. It's absolutely absurd, but holy hell is it ever satisfying. Honestly, not seeing all the steps involved to healing Chrollo's Nen or watching Hisoka chase him to the arena only makes it better. Because this fight has already been built up such a long time, we don't need to dwell on extra setup. It's hard for me to imagine how dragging out the setup any longer would be more interesting than just jumping to the fight already. Just because it's been a while doesn't mean that build-up goes away. We have merely moved the fight down the timeline to a different date. But none of this would be possible without that big Chimera Ant arc separating this fight from Greed Island, without that huge chunk of time going by the audience had to feel. Here, the amount of days or months in the story which have passed is not nearly as important as with Krapika's development. Rather, what matters more, and I'll say it again, time has passed. 100 episodes have gone by. We have been waiting forever, and for our patience, we have been rewarded. And that's it, unfortunately. The manga hasn't gone much beyond this point, so I'm afraid anything I add would just be redundant. So then wait, what about the final character, Leorio? Did you just forget? Well, much like with my second best episode of Hunter x Hunter video, my problem is not that I have nothing to say on him, but simply that there is too much to be said. Ultimately, it would just derail the point of this discussion if I were to tack it into this video. So stick around the next week. You just might get some analysis on that one.